This was an absolutely crazy weekend with Bitcoin Cash. And if you were not by your computer, if you didn't get a chance to see what went down, I want to talk about what happened with Bitcoin Cash this weekend, how this crazy spike you're seeing here, where Bitcoin Cash went from around $600 or so to around $800 or so when I first talked about it, and then all the way up to over $2,000+ and now back down to less than $1,200 right now. So it's been a crazy volatile time with Bitcoin Cash as well as with Bitcoin, where a lot of these movements on Bitcoin were inversely correlated with Bitcoin Cash. So as Bitcoin Cash was going through the roof, money was flowing out of Bitcoin into Bitcoin Cash, subsequently dropping the Bitcoin price, which we saw go all the way down from over $7,000 after the for cancellation to around $5,600. So a big drop in the overall, big drop in the overall Bitcoin price, as well as a big pump and run up in the Bitcoin Cash, which is now cooling off quite a bit for the time being. So we'll see if this cool off continues to go, as well as I want to talk a little bit about just very high level for some beginners, what the heck the difference is between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and what you should know. Is Bitcoin the real Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin Cash the real Bitcoin? And what are each solutions, or what are each cryptocurrencies trying to accomplish, and how are they different from each other? So let's hop into that today in this video. As you can see in this chart right here, this is the Bitcoin Cash to US dollar chart. And like I said before, Bitcoin Cash ran up from around $600 or so back on November 9th to, at one point in time on the 12th, it went up all the way to its very peak. It didn't close at, but it went up on its very peak to over $2,770, which is just absolutely outrageous. It was at one point over a 300% gain. Now it's back down from the beginning of the week to about a 80% gain as of right now. And there was an incredible amount of FOMO on this. There was people freaking out. At one point in time, Bitcoin Cash actually passed Ethereum, and we'll look at it, but Bitcoin Cash actually and very briefly passed Ethereum as the number 2 cryptocurrency on CoinMarketCap, as well as all the other sites where it was Bitcoin, it was Bitcoin Cash, and then it was Ethereum. So Bitcoin Cash went from less than $10 billion coin in a lot of respects, all the way up to $30 billion. It had a $20 billion of market cap, and it was a ridiculous amount of money that flowed into Bitcoin Cash. It was pretty, in the past 3 or 4 months, this was probably one of the crazier things I've seen. The amount of money that flowed into what some would consider an altcoin. If it's not Bitcoin Core, a lot of people consider it an altcoin. So it was pretty incredible. But as we're looking at it right now, it's been a pretty steady sell-off since that peak where it went from. It's been a pretty steady sell-off if we're looking at, in the past 7 days. We'll take a look at it. But almost a classic, I don't want to say pump and dump, but it kind of looks, in a lot of respects, it looks like it is. I mean, it went up to almost a $40 billion market cap at one point in time, and is now settled off to below $20 billion in market cap. Bitcoin Cash has. And a lot of this volume was driven out of Korea, which has been interesting. It was very much on BitHum. It was over $8 billion in volume on the other day. So, I mean, like I said, there was a ton of money pumping into the space on November 11th, on November 12th, and you could see that in the market cap. Now, what does this all mean? Because if you were on Twitter the other day, there were people out there that were saying, Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin. There were a lot of key contributors to the cryptocurrency world that are telling you Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin. I'm no longer working on Bitcoin. I'm now only working on Bitcoin Cash. There were a lot of people that came out of the woodwork and said some things of that nature. So what does that mean? Really, what does that mean for you? And how should you understand the difference of Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash, and kind of what people are trying to accomplish? So it's fairly simple to break down in a lot of respects. I mean, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to just try and break this down in a very, very simple manner, and I'll put a link to this article below as well. But as we're looking at this, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash are two different cryptocurrencies. If you're not familiar at all, Bitcoin Cash was hard forked from the original, Bitcoin Core blockchain in August of 2017. Now, Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin are, like I said, two separate cryptocurrencies, and in some cases, trying to solve, let's say, different things or trying to solve things in different ways. The big thing is transaction scalability. With Bitcoin, they're trying to solve transaction scalability in a lot of respects with what people consider like second layer solutions, basically building on top of the blockchain, and also utilizing something called segregated witness or SegWit, which will allow more transactions to happen per block or per every 10 minutes than they would if they were just increasing the block size, which right now for Bitcoin Core or the Bitcoin regular blockchain, whatever you want to, or just Bitcoin in general, is 1 megabit. It's 1 megabit basically per block, whereas Bitcoin Cash is trying to solve the issue with transactions. It's trying to solve the issues with transactions and fees associated with those transactions by simply increasing the block size and not utilizing segregated witness or SegWit. And Bitcoin Cash has increased their block size to 8 megabits per second. And so right now there's kind of competing arguments or competing camps where the Bitcoin Core advocates, there's very much two different sets of advocates, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. But the Bitcoin Core team says that in a lot of cases, by increasing the block size to 8 megabits, you are limiting decentralization because it takes a very powerful computer it takes specific specialization to be able to actually run a Bitcoin node. And with the 8 megabits per second, that's going to make it a lot more difficult. The Bitcoin Cash side says, well, it's a super simple solution to increase the overall block size, and it allows for a lot more transactions to happen, and it also allows for a lot less competition on transactions. So the fees right now for the time being on Bitcoin Cash are much lower than they are on Bitcoin. And it's really interesting if you look at a couple different places. So number one, if you go to our Bitcoin, and then if you go to reddit.r/r.bitcoin, and then if you go to Reddit BTC, they are basically two completely different. You would think, one is Bitcoin and the other one is Bitcoin, the internet of money, and one is just Bitcoin. Our BTC is basically Reddit Bitcoin Cash, where they talk a lot about the demerits of Bitcoin. They talk a lot about why Bitcoin Cash is significantly better. They rip on Bitcoin a lot and say that the Bitcoin Cash philosophy is the best way to go, blah blah blah. Our Bitcoin is like our Bitcoin Core or just regular Bitcoin, and they tend to talk a lot about regular Bitcoin and also disparage Bitcoin Cash. So there's a lot of animosity between the two, and there's literally two separate, in a lot of cases, communities that are existing right now. You have our Bitcoin, you have our BTC. Our Bitcoin is for Bitcoin Core, our BTC is for Bitcoin Cash. And not only leading to that confusion, but you have Bitcoin.org. You have Bitcoin.org, which is the kind of Bitcoin. Basically, you have Bitcoin.org, which is the initial website for Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Core network, and then you have Bitcoin.com, which is owned by Roger Ver, and this is very much an advocate for Bitcoin Cash. You can see Bitcoin up here, the price here. You can see Bitcoin Cash, the price there, and then if you're looking at the differences, they posted an article, and this is a while ago, but very much, I would say, slanted to Bitcoin Cash. If you posted, the differences between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash was created to answer the year-long debate among the Bitcoin community, the best way to scale Bitcoin, and that is by increasing the block size in Bitcoin's code base, allowing for, instead of 250,000 transactions per day to around 2 million transactions per day. Whereas with Bitcoin right now, the transaction scalability is limited and the fees are a bit higher than we've typically seen previously. So what does this all mean, and how should we think about it? How should we look at it? If you are, either purely an investor, or if you are purely an investor, or you are somebody who is just interested in the technology. Well, I think that for me personally, when I'm looking at this, number one, I'm not a big fan of like the contentious debate between everything. People get pretty nasty on both sides of the house, whether whether there are, the Bitcoin maximalists, or like the big time Bitcoin core advocates, or if it's somebody that is, a big fan of Bitcoin Cash. They tend to, sometimes there can be some pretty nasty debates, because in a lot of cases, I almost think this is like politics, but with money involved. And the only thing worse than debating politics is debating politics when people get rich off of it. So, it's pretty crazy to see what is occurring and what is happening there. To that point, people talk a lot about now. The hot thing to talk about is after you've seen this spike up. We've seen this spike up to over $2,000 with Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash is now going to be the real Bitcoin, and it's time for Bitcoin Cash is going to outpace. Bitcoin Cash is going to outpace Bitcoin and take over, and people are going to start utilizing that now. Well, the big thing that the folks at Bitcoin, the big thing that the reason and the big thing that people are pointing to when they say that is because of the transaction scalability of Bitcoin Cash, as well as the fees. So right now, the fees definitely are an issue with Bitcoin Core. There is no way to get around it. When I started with Bitcoin, you could send a ton of Bitcoin for, you could send thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin for, less than $1. Now it might take you $10, $20 to get to get your Bitcoin sent fast enough. And unless you're sending, multiple Bitcoin, you don't really want to spend $10 to send $100 worth of Bitcoin. It doesn't really make any sense. So the transaction fees are definitely an issue when it comes to Bitcoin. But is that enough for Bitcoin Cash to take over? A lot of people point to the fact that there are a lot of cryptocurrencies out there that can be sent with low fees. I mean, you have Dogecoin, you have Litecoin, you have Ethereum. There are a lot of cryptocurrencies that basically can do what Bitcoin Cash does. So is Bitcoin Cash really have any other big value propositions outside of having the Bitcoin name and having a bigger block size that right now is helpful from a transaction scalability perspective and a fee perspective? Well, that's debatable. And people will debate it on both sides, and I tend to be fairly neutral. The one thing that I will say here is that I hope, as somebody who is looking at this, is that I hope that this kind of lights a fire under the Bitcoin core team to improve scalability and reduce the fees, because I think they're clearly seeing that there is some competition and that Bitcoin Cash is very competitive and is trying to, in a lot of places, take Bitcoin down. They don't want to sit idly. They do not want to sit idly while Bitcoin continues to run up. Bitcoin Cash is trying to come for that number 2. It already came for that number 2 spot from Ethereum and took it briefly, and really wants to come for that number 1 spot on CoinMarketCap and thinks it has the reason to do so. Now, as we're looking at the overall price action, I'll pop out of Bitcoin Cash and I'll look at Bitcoin. And what I think is fairly interesting too is that this gave, when SegWit was canceled, this gave folks an opportunity to, here is the time when SegWit was canceled up here. And when SegWit was canceled, this gave folks an opportunity. There were, I think, definitely a subset of people that wanted to see larger block sizes. They weren't certainly as vocal, on Twitter as the whole No 2X crowd was, which was very vocal. But I think there were definitely a subset of people that wanted to see larger block sizes. And when we see that in action, what's going on right there? Bitcoin Cash has provided a place that while you can't utilize SegWit, if you want to approach things, if you want to approach investing, if you were somebody who really was a big advocate of SegWit 2X and that got canceled, the place where you would have put your money is Bitcoin Cash. So once that got canceled, that was, in a lot of cases, the inverse correlation here of, Bitcoin Cash has gone through the roof, and here we have Bitcoin just going down and down and down. Now, is Bitcoin Cash in a position to recover? it's potential. It's certainly a potential. I personally, what happened was, for me, how I played it this week is I actually sold some of my Bitcoin at around $6,900 or so in this range right here. And then I bought back in at $5,800 or so. And I bought back in around $5,800 or so back here. Was where I ended up buying back in, and then I sold a little bit off at $6,400, and I'm waiting for a little bit of a pullback, just playing some of the volatility here. If it goes up, then so be it. I still have the vast majority of mine, but I bought in back at the $5,800 mark and took a little bit of profit here in case things go back down, but am still holding on to the majority of my Bitcoin. Now, I don't have any Bitcoin Cash. Right now, the markets for me are just too unstable at this point in time. It's been a little bit crazy it's been a little bit crazy to see. It's been a little bit crazy to watch. When I made on, I think it was on Friday, when I made my first, when I made the first video discussing the Bitcoin Cash pump, it was at $800 and it was up about 50%. And, typically I don't hop into a new market after it's already up 50% in the day, because a lot of times when I do that, I buy in at the top. In the case of Bitcoin, I'll pull back up again here. But in the case of Bitcoin Cash, if I were to have hopped in at around that $800 mark or so, this was when I made that first video. Down here was when I made that first video, I would have had a ton of profit. I was kicking myself for it, but you know what? If you're not smart enough to make the move, you're not smart enough to make the move, and you didn't know it was coming. So I thought that a 50% jump up from the $400 or $500 or so range up to $800 was going to be the pump that we would see, and I didn't make any move down here, and then it just continued to run and it continued to run. And like I said, I am not in right now on Bitcoin Cash. I don't know if this is going to continue to move in a downward trajectory. It looks like it's going to have a slow, steady sell-off to me, but that could be completely wrong, and there might be a round 2 of the pump that could send it through the roof. Who knows? But these guys might have the guys who pump this in a lot of respects, Korea, Roger Ver, all those dudes out there, might have might have spent all their money. Who knows how this is going to pan out? But as of right now, I think I'm getting the feeling that the pump might be dying off, the excitement might be dying off a little bit, so I'm going to stay the heck out of Bitcoin Cash. Now, outside of that, in the past 24 hours, I'm going to refresh this page real quick, but in the past 24 hours or so, we've seen some pretty interesting movements with Bitcoin having a nice slight recovery, Ethereum having a little bit of a recovery as well, Dash at its all-time high. I have no investment in Dash, but Dash at its all-time high, which is great to see, as well as a couple other, some nice movements from a number of other cryptocurrencies out there on the day. OMG up a nice 10%, Lisk up 15%, Zcash up 15%. So we've seen some nice movements on the day. Outside of that, what I'm looking at right now and what I'm going to continue to, quite frankly, stay fascinated by is this Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash drama. Is there really do people, quite frankly, do they care about the transaction scalability and the fees? Because if they care about transaction scalability and fees, money might continue to flow into Bitcoin Cash. If people are viewing Bitcoin more as that digital store of gold by simply because it is raised in value, or really out of necessity because Bitcoin isn't the best transactional solution right now, then money might flow into Bitcoin over Bitcoin Cash. But I'm going to stay watching this because I think this is going to be an intense battle for the time being. Instead of SegWit 2x, I would almost look at this instead of B2X coin, instead of SegWit 2x. Now we have Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, or Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. I mean, it's been here for a while, but I think the completion of the cancellation of that SegWit 2x fork now gives those people that were interested in SegWit 2x, kind of pushes them to, in a lot of cases, have to consider Bitcoin Cash. So that's going to be an interesting thing to look at in the future. And if you guys have any questions on as far as all of this goes and what is happening with all of this Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash drama, definitely sound off in the comments. Happy to try to answer as many things as possible. And if you are new to the channel by any chance, my name is Crypto Bobby. I do daily videos on the subject of cryptocurrency as well as crypto happy hour a few different times per week when I do have an opportunity, hop on YouTube live, have a couple of beers with you guys, talk about what's happening in the markets. Appreciate the time, everybody. Crypto Bobby signing out. Peace.